One thing we're going to do to start with is to sign a document called the Memorandum of Understanding, which is basically a document that we have renegotiated with the club and these Mariners Trust. We were formed again round about 2011, was it?
Yes.
I think it was about 2011, when we had a sort of agreement of how we would work together, and this latest one is something that we've been working on for quite a while with Supporters Direct to come up with a memorandum of understanding of how we will operate together, which John now is going to sign.
If I could just explain a bit about this. Deborah, I think we're the 5th club in the country to do this now.
Yeah.
So it's something that Supporters Direct are trying to push around the country. It's best practice really for clubs and fans to work together. So signing this is a commitment from both sides really to improve fan engagement, fan communication on our behalf as well. It is about us doing things better, so telling our members and the fans more about what we're doing and the things that are going on. So it's a big step forward. It also commits us to continue to fundraise, but importantly it does take away the thing that I know a lot of people commented about was any link between that and our place on the board. So there is no link now between us raising money for the club and having to do that to have a place on the board. The two things are totally separate. So this is a big move for us, and I really want to thank Supporters Direct for helping us do this, and for the club in the positive way they've approached it. So I think for us this is quite a big moment. So thank you.
Just before we start, I'd like to mention that Alan Rutter's given up a very special evening this evening to come here. It's his wedding anniversary today.
Yeah, I'll put it off.
John, as well as giving up a council meeting this evening, let me explain about his romance. He originally scheduled this night for the 14th of February.
I chose that date.
And Dave, also, romance isn't dead with him. He celebrates his wedding anniversary every 2 years because it coincides with the football match. That was one of your brothers too. Right, are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
These are in no particular order. With regards to a new stadium, John, the question of where the 20,000 comes from was a very good point that you raised recently.
20 million.
Sorry, 20 million.
1, 2. Okay, so if I may just start by saying good evening everybody. It's fantastic to be here and such a good turnout. If I may just touch upon the memorandum to start with, please. I think it's fair to say that the football club has absolutely embraced the trust from day one. We continue to do that, and this document really just cements home the good working relationship that we've got. That doesn't mean that we've got hands in each other's pockets whatsoever. There are challenging discussions sometimes that go on in the background. I mean, for instance, on trying to bring forward an exile package, we didn't quite meet eye to eye, and that debate continues. I suspect there might be some questions on that later, but let's see where that goes. And we are continuing to progress that exile package, albeit that we did come up with the baker's dozen, which does assist those that can't make every game. We sold a number of those. I think it was about 12 or 13 actually, very befitting to the baker's dozen. So yeah, in terms of relocation, it's been an agonising affair. It actually began seriously in 1994 when Greatcoats appeared after a sequential appraisal was done, which chose that site. And for 3 or 4 years, things went fairly slowly, and actually my first stint on the board was in 1999. I joined the Bill Carr board, and things were going very swimmingly. My responsibility that year, before we were all decapitated, for want of a better description, at an infamous AGM, that were going very, very well. And without question, delivery looked on the chopping block. We had B&Q as an anchor tenant, and things were going in the right direction, very much so. Unfortunately, that change of regime did halt the process, and it somewhat lost its way. And at the time, I think it's fair to say the politicians wondered why they were putting the head on a chopping block, supporting a club that actually didn't know whether it wanted to relocate or not. So in the passage of time, ultimately B&Q decided to go elsewhere, daft as it sounds, Peaks Parkway. And we finally got a planning permission, which was belated at Greatcoats in 2001, and I rejoined the board around that time. Now, inherited a lot of problems when I rejoined the board, a lot of expense, a lot of problems in the locker, and they all had to be dealt with. Very high wages, large tax debts, and bank balances above the limit that was committed by the bank, and ultimately we could go no further. So all of these matters had to be addressed, as well as ultimately trying to get relocation back on track, which had to wait until around 2005 before finally we got a house in order and knew how we were going to pave the way for all of these bills that had accrued from years past. So in 2005 we picked the gauntlet up again, and we spoke to the council about dusting down the previous planning permission and bringing it up to date. And we agreed basically a set of works that would need to be done, and we budgeted for that, and the cost indicated was around £110,000. We set sail, we committed to do that work, and actually it took a lot longer than we anticipated. There were a lot of problems along the way, and it's fair to say there wasn't necessarily wholehearted political support, as well as we had issues with Natural England, railway lines, flock of golden plovers that subjected us to a overwintering survey, and of course we had the Henry Boot scheme, which was directly competing with the important enabling development that we needed to get the stadium catalyst funding. So a lot of problems were put in the way, and if we'd have managed to get a planning permission in early 2007, we almost certainly would have signed up Debenhams who were interested, and again that anchor tenant is the all-important element to get a scheme away. However, we were subjected to judicial review by Henry Boots and finally got a planning permission in November 2007, which probably most of you will be aware that culminated with the crash in the economy, when of course retail turned its back on further growth, consolidated, and weren't interested in relocating or locating in towns like ours. So again, Greatcoats' opportunity was lost. Moving towards sort of 2010, we picked the gauntlet up again. We did a further sequential appraisal after coming to terms with Greatcoats. Realistically, was off the table. The landowner wasn't interested, and we had to move forward. So we did another sequential appraisal. We set out the criteria, the important criteria which in real terms needed to enable us to compete with our counterparts, most of them that have already relocated and are enjoying significant additional income streams to us. So to sort of marry up to that and compete with that, we needed to relocate to similar facilities, ideally with training pitches and community pitches and car parking all on the same site, together with a raft of other things that bring additional income as well. So Peaks Parkway, as part of that sequential appraisal, was chosen because it met all the criteria, ticked all the boxes. We had considerable support from the landowners, and basically the profit share on the land, if it would have gone into housing, it would have been the contribution going to the football club to catalyse the building of the stadium. Additionally, we would have needed some retail, and there was already some retail allocated to the football stadium permission in the local plan. So theoretically, those two things could have enabled relocation. Unfortunately, in the passage of time, it's taken too long to really get the backing we needed for Peaks Parkway, and essentially we now have another competing scheme at the Ramsden site, which has got a permission for 150,000 square feet of retail. And when you think what's happening to town centres, there clearly isn't a need for 300,000 square feet of retail, so another one of the tickets for delivery has disappeared. So it's become immeasurably harder now to relocate to places like Peaks Parkway and Virgin sites, which in reality offer the best business case for relocation. Now, I think it's very important for everybody to realise that the club isn't precious in any way, shape or form where it relocates to. It wants to relocate, and basically we're all ears and we're all in support of anything that can make that happen. There's not been a glimmer of argument about Freeman Street whatsoever. The question is it suitable? Does it work for the football club? Does it give us the comparable income streams that we would have enjoyed if we could have made it happen at Peaks Parkway, and also in particular what our counterparts are enjoying? Because we clearly wanted to compete on the same terms. You take Chesterfield, take Shrewsbury, they've got huge car parks. People like to turn up, jump out the car, maybe pay a couple of quid or whatever. That income goes into the football club, and they'll come more likely to every game rather than pick and choose the games. So car parking is an essential asset really to getting fans on a more regular basis that might pick and choose games. So it's good for driving income in two ways. So the facts of the matter is there isn't that much political support for Peaks Parkway, irrespective of the council's own sequential appraisal coming up with the same conclusion the football clubs, which was that Peaks Parkway was the preferred site. So where are we today? We've agreed with the council that we would pause at Peaks Parkway, put a pause on it whilst we look at other opportunities. Now clearly there's a lot of excitement, a real buzz about at the moment for the football club to regenerate Freeman Street. Now that's all well and good, but the serious question is, how is it going to be paid for? Because public money, state aid rules don't provide for public money to be used for such a venture without real good reason. Now, just regenerating the area and giving a stadium to the football club is not sufficient good reason. Now, we do an awful lot in the community, and you can skirt around a lot of that, and you can make certain justifications for maybe reduced rents and so on, whereby the council could support the football club to relocate, predominantly pay for a stadium on a favourable basis in terms of rent or whatever. However, we've really got to look at what we were trying to achieve originally and make sure that we don't jump out of the fat into the frying pan. The last thing we want to do is decamp from Blundell Park, which has got relatively low overheads, into a new stadium where there isn't sufficient additional income streams and there is additional costs which don't enable us to compete even though we're in a brand new stadium. So there's a lot of discussion to go. There's a lot of understanding to be found out in terms of how it's going to be paid for, exactly where it's going to go, and is there sufficient space, and what sort of facilities will be on offer for us to be able to drive up those secondary income streams that's going to help us ultimately with our playing budget. So where we are right now is we're working with the Freeman, and clearly they put out a video last week that gave a lot of excitement. There's a real buzz in the air for sure, and we're working with them. We're still looking at other options, so are the council. So in real terms, we've got to come together, we've got to end up on the same page, we've got to look at the problems, and we've got to find a way forward in partnership. Now, the best thing about the situation today is that the council clearly want to lead on relocation. They've said they will support relocation and understand that they're going to have to provide some finance. So we're really on a good page in that sense. Having the political support and backing is more likely to deliver this than without, of course. So broadly, that's where we are. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, John. Just as an addendum to that, has the possibility of redeveloping Blundell Park ever been considered?
Yes, it has. And quite bluntly, if you spent £10 million here, you wouldn't improve the business case. Parking, accessibility, and the wider facilities you need to drive up the income streams to justify a £10 million investment, it would be difficult to really qualify. So relocation seems inevitable, but I wouldn't rule out as being here for a little while longer. And clearly, the club has already reported the fact that we have to upgrade some of the facilities here. We've already made big efforts in the main stand. There's heating now, renewed heating. There was nothing like the problem that people have intimated, but the showers had broken down 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years when the players have been getting showers. So that's a serious problem. The heating was never good enough for the whole of my time here, and I suspect it was installed in the 60s. So it was all past its sell-by date. It's all now been replaced, and broadly the bars over there are enjoying some warmth, particularly on cold days, and the players have got nice warm showers and warm changing rooms. So we've made that progress. We've invested in disabled facilities. We've got further investment in that we're producing a lift for this stand here, so that we can hold the Player of the Year upstairs, and also support the disabled fraternity in terms of accessing that facility more so on match days. So we are making steps. We've got investment to make in the floodlights and 1 or 2 other projects that's on the chopping block. So there's quite a bit of investment going in right now to really make amends for the allowance of letting these things go whilst we anticipated relocating. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, John. There's a gentleman here saying, I understand the floodlights are in need of repair or replacement. Will their replacements be taken to any new ground? With the constant development of LEDs, the best place for them would probably be the roof of the young stand. And if you need a lighting design compliant with EFL regulations, just let him know.
Very kind. And
that's James Howe.
Thank you, James. Maybe James could get in touch with Nick Dale. He's very easy to contact. It's nick@gtfc.co.uk. In comes the emails from everybody. But Nick's handling this actually. He's looking at the feasibility of new light towers. The old towers aren't dangerous in any way, shape or form. There are some corrosion issues. But at the end of the day, it's predominantly centred around the ladders and things of that nature, which don't present a serious hazard. But clearly, they've got to be considered in terms of access up there and so on. The lights aren't sufficiently bright. We're struggling always to keep them all on at the same time for one reason or another. They're very, very old fittings, and we do a lot of work on them to keep them as best as they are. And there's 3 or 4 bulbs again and fittings that are in a state of disrepair that need mending right now. But our objective is to probably reduce those to the ground in the closed season and replace them with 4 new stanchions, which will be of the sort that will tilt down to the ground so that they're more easy to maintain. Whether they'll be able to be used on a new stadium, I doubt. I think there'll be more for the community pitches. So they can be transplanted. It shouldn't be wasted money, but of course the installation costs will be duplicated, but that I don't believe is a big issue.
Yeah, thank you, John. And taking into account some of those developments nationally, will the club revisit during this stadium works that you're doing now or proposing? Would the club revisit the idea of introducing a safe standing area at Blundell Park in the interest of fans' experience?
Sure, fully understand that, and I remember being there myself, and who knows, in the not too distant future I might be stood in the stands as well with you. So I would like to see safe standing back. The problem is the club falls foul of being in the First Division when an Act of Parliament came about that committed the clubs at that level and above to all-seater stadiums. And coming down the football ladder makes no difference to that. The Act stays in place. So effectively we'd have to get the government to have a rethink, and there's been a lobby, as we all know. There's been a lot of hard work and effort going into trying to change that Act, and I don't think that should stop. And if it can be reversed in time, adjusted in time, without question the football club would embrace safe standing. It is actually more economical. It would drive prices down as long as you don't have to put a seat in place as well. You know, proper barriers, it can easily be made safe. Some of the horrors of the past, you know, lessons have been learned. Engineering's what it is, and we know how to do it. So my personal view is we don't need seats, we need proper railings, and safe standing for particular parts of the ground are very much the way forward, and we need to work hard on getting the government to change its mind and reconsider the Act.
Right, to go off that subject a little, John, one here. Why did you hire Michael Jolly? What stood out about him compared to the competition, and how much of a risk did you consider his appointment to be at the time?
Each and every manager's a risk, and the risk is that they don't get the look, they don't select the personnel don't gel, and one way and another it doesn't work. That's the risk. On the opposite hand, clearly there could be an upside, and in some cases we've had that upside. I think it's fair to say Alan Buckley was a brilliant success in his first two spells, and it didn't work out so well in the last spell. Russell, to some degree, had a decent spell in his first spell. Paul Hurst, I think he did very, very well for us, in all honesty. You know, subsequent to that, we've found it more difficult selecting a manager that could bring us the fortunes that we needed. Michael, obviously, at the moment, he's inspired the fans. He's brought the club and fans close together, and that's fantastic. Sometimes a difficult thing to do from a club point of view, and it does need something to catalyse that and inspire that. And without question, Michael has put himself in the community. We're playing some attractive football. We've had our dips, we've had our difficult periods this season. It was tremendous what he did for us last season in terms of survival, and that was the all-important thing. It was a big risk appointing him, because clearly he'd only managed a club in Sweden, and frankly that club was relegated. His experience was gathered before that in the youth system, Burnley, he'd been a little while at Lincoln, and one or two other clubs. So it was a risk. But in terms of interviewing Michael, I think the board were smitten very quickly. And it has to be said that Michael came from left field, in the sense that, unfortunately, when it comes to a time that you're managerless, they pour through the doors to the applications, through the letterbox, and you get something in the order of 30, 40, 50 applications, and it's somewhat a merry-go-round. And once again, this football club was looking to break the mould and move away from that merry-go-round. I think it's fair to say our biggest successes have come from, if you think Alan Buckley came from the conference, Kettering, Russell Slade came from Scarborough, which was 2 levels, I think, conference and the next one down, whatever that is. And Paul and Rob Scott and Paul Hurst. They came obviously 2 levels down. And these managers have been very successful for us. And we've also had some success with Brian Laws, who came as a rookie manager. So when all's said and done, I think this club's got track record of giving people a chance, giving managers a chance. And you watch the merry-go-round, and quite often you see these managers coming and going. And we've had a little bit of a share of that. And I think it's personally less chance of working. They're not so hungry, and sometimes their demands are different, and they don't quite fit with the football club's aspirations and if you like, the scope of what can be provided to them. So it's fair to say that giving managers an opportunity has been probably a real success for this football club. And looking towards Michael, clearly we've fallen in the same mould. So we had these, let's say, 50 or so applicants and targets that we'd headhunted, and ultimately, as a board, we were looking at the shortlist and reducing that shortlist and looking again. And we were really concerned with the shortlist we drew up, that we didn't really come together thinking there was a good choice. So I went out and I asked Humberside Radio, actually, I'm not sure if it was Matt, if I could go on the radio, and would he ask me a question how things are going in terms of managerial appointment, which response I made was that I'm surprised we've not seen any want-to-be managers or managers from lower levels, where's the next Brian Laws, and we've not been inspired by what applicants we've got, and I just wonder where they all are. Well, that went viral. It went to Sky Sports. It was on TV everywhere. It went international, and actually Michael and his agent spotted it, and that's where the contact actually came. And since then, you obviously know what happened. We appointed him. So that's broadly how Michael was first of all attracted to the football club. But I've got to tell you, he was very professional in his delivery in terms of the interviews. And yes, we're really, really pleased with what he's bringing, and the fact that he's brought the club and the fans closer together is, breath of fresh air.
Can I just come in on that, John?
Please.
I mean, obviously, I was involved in all the shortlisting and interviewing for the manager's position when Michael was appointed, and I'd just like to echo what John said about the hours and hours and hours of hard work that goes into finding a manager for the football club and sifting through and I was struck actually by the talk of Valentine's night, because actually last Valentine's night we were doing interviews for the manager, so it is something that real work goes into, and I just wanted to echo what John said about the board all coming together. Michael just offered something different, and he really was just he presented so well, and it's borne out to be a good decision, but I just wanted to echo that it was a whole board decision.
Keep the microphone there, John. It's coming along. It's coming along. Another question is to go away from John a little, give him a bit of a rest. If you could sign one former player who played for the club whilst you've been involved with the club to play in this current team, who would it be and why?
Alan Poughton, without a doubt.
Alan.
For me?
Yeah?
Wayne Burnett, definitely.
Clive Mendonca.
You pinched him. I was going to say that. Shall I say
Podge?
Yeah.
That's controversial.
Trust David to be controversial.
He's still knocking the goals in. Anyway, that's by the by, it's gone. Just to go back to Michael a little, what do the club have in place to ensure the philosophy discussed at Michael Jolly's appointment remains in place should he unexpectedly leave the club? I.e., will revert to other managers, should I say.
At the end of the day, the manager dictates how the club is set up in terms of the playing side. Without question, you support a manager until you decide you're not going to support him anymore or he leaves. It's hardly likely that a new manager coming in wouldn't have the same philosophy, because quite frankly, there's almost a story that they tell which is pretty identical. Michael did deliver a point of difference, there's no question of that, but in terms of strategy and how you play the game, I think there's only one way, and they all say it when you interview them. I do believe that just about every manager would have the same philosophy, but at the end of the day, if things start to go wrong, some managers approach that in a cool way, and some managers in a knee-jerk manner. I've seen both sorts, and ultimately as a board what we do is try and support them in the best way we can until either they leave or unfortunately it comes to the end of the line.
Yep, thank you, John. One or two we've had from your mates, the keyboard warriors. Are the board of GTFC actively looking for new investment at this moment in time, or have you given up? Are we moving heaven and earth to find external investment that is badly needed? And do you think your income and... Sorry, I can't read.
I can guess what they're saying.
Yeah. Sorry, it's your
okay.
right.
Okay, well, firstly, hi to my fishy friends. I would like to just sort of refer to my dress code, if I may. I come from a family of 5, and it was usually, when we were younger, first up, best dressed. And at the last fans forum, my dress code was much discussed. I'm now at a stage in my life where I basically do as I'm told. Here indoors sets my gear out, as she did tonight. So for any of those comments that might come forward, could you please direct them at my good lady, because I'm dressed as she said. With new shoes, of course. Okay, so the question again, please, Terry. I don't want to put you off.
New investment.
Are the board of GTFC actively looking for new investment?
Well, look, going back, I think it's probably 3-4 years ago, the club invested circa £20,000 in an agency, and that agency was tasked with looking for an interested party, whether it be local, national or international. And a lot of work and commitment was put into doing that, which ultimately drew a blank. Steve Marley, at the last fans forum, very much clarified the interest that was on the table, and that ultimately it didn't materialise in a serious proposal coming forward. Now, since 2010, I stood down as chairman. And that was a clear signal, and it was stated in the press that I felt that you know, we ought to be looking for some new blood, some new ideas. It doesn't mean that I've at all given up or lost interest, because nothing could be further from the truth. I care passionately about the football club, and there's not a day goes by without giving full, wholehearted commitment. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody joins a football club with a view to being there 18 years later. Certainly I didn't expect that, maybe 4 or 5 years, but not having the responsibility for 18 years, it really is baggage that one could do without, to say the least. Yes, absolutely, the football club has been promoted as an opportunity for an investor, somebody that might want to enable the club to relocate. We've talked to several parties that wanted to pursue this idea. Ultimately, they will look at what's possible locally. They'll do their own homework in terms of, is it feasible or not? Is it viable or not? Is it profitable or not? And ultimately, the parties that we've been talking to over a number of years have never come forward with any viable proposals. We've had tie kickers, we've had people that would want to take over, just take over, without demonstrating financial backing and commitment. I don't think any of us could sleep well on the board if we handed it over to such a vehicle, and then if it went wrong we would feel shocking, and yours truly in particular. So good custodians or bad custodians, I actually don't believe I'm a bad custodian. We've got the best interests of the club at heart as a board, and ultimately the buck stops at me in terms of funding the football club. I wish that was different. It's myself who's got the responsibility if things go wrong and putting my hand in my pocket. When things go right, everybody can run a football club, quite frankly. But it's those difficult times that's got to be managed. So we're all ears, we continue to be all ears, and if there is a genuine interested party that wants to take the club forward, we need to see not only a letter of intent, but we need to see proposals on the table that the board can fully consider. To date, we've never had anything, and John will bear that out, I guess. Would you like to comment, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the key to anybody taking over the football club is, from my point of view, as a representative of the trust on the board, would be sustainability. You know, we do not need somebody that's all mouth and no trousers to come in and to use it as a vanity project and then walk away, or not have the money behind them. So, you know, it is constant, the search for investment, the openness to that. I can absolutely vouch for it, and as John said, it's just really important to me on the board that when the time comes and we find the right person, it's the right person. It's not a tyre kicker. It's not somebody that's going to cut and run when things don't look good. That when in January you're you're staring down the face of relegation, looking at a transfer window and needing funds to make a managerial change or a player change, because these things cost a lot of money. That these are people who are committed to the club, committed to the community, and committed to helping us move the club forward. So I agree 100%. We need the new investment, absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree, but it has to be the right investment.
And I think I'd just like to answer some of the questions that we've received at the Trust, really. There's been a lot of conversation about the fans running the football club. It's an absolute minefield, really. A majority of the people that sit on the Mariners Trust board have full-time jobs, and they do it because they're dedicated to the football club. There are massive problems about having fans-owned clubs, some good, some bad, but I think it stands at the moment that the persons that sit on the Trust board at the moment have no desire to have a fans-run football club. That may change if the people on the board changed, but that's the view of the present Trust board. I just wanted to clear that up because there has been a lot of enquiries and questions in relation to that over the last few months.
Thank you, Alan. And it is fair to say that we have met a couple of fans groups, or somebody that fronted fans groups, and when we've explained to them the workings of the football club and some of the risks and responsibilities, quite frankly, it's gone no further. The club is all embracing. I don't care what anybody says, my door's always open. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm meeting 3 people that's going to make renewed proposals for holding events on the pitch, such as, dare I say, Elton John or whoever they propose. Each time we've looked at doing such a thing, we've demonstrated a failure to be viable. They believe things have changed, the environment's different, and they can make it pay. So again, we're looking at it. We're all ears, we always are, we're very accommodating. In terms of engagement, I don't think there's a club that's actually closer to the fans than we are. We're an AGM, we're a PLC. Everything about the football club is visible. We have shareholder meetings, which of course are stakeholders, fans of this football club. We have fans forums, we have meetings like this. We've got a trust member on the board. We have quarterly meetings and more. Between the officers of the trust and the football club. My door's always open, and other directors are positively engaged in activities within the football club. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't believe there's many clubs that compete with that sort of engagement and closeness to the fans, the supporters. Okay.
Okay, John, thanks. Another one, back to the manager. I'm not sure if it's down to financial reasons or reasons of your own, but what's the reason behind giving managers rolling contracts? And can we please extend Michael's contract in the foreseeable future?
Okay. Well, ultimately, it's risk versus reward. I would argue it's a sensible approach. I think it's worked for us enormously. We've never had a manager yet that's walked away without the club being compensated. But we've all, several times had to pay managers off, and that can be costly, particularly if you've got 2-3 year contracts. I don't believe it's a place we need to go. I think the manager's comfortably signed the contract, and he was pleased to do so, and we were pleased to have it signed on that basis. Now, what I would say is that, frankly, if another club came in for a manager, they want the manager there and then. They're not prepared to plan ahead. Which football club plans ahead for 6 and 8 months? So ultimately, a rolling contract gives you that security. So therefore, you would be able to negotiate a release, a compensation, for want of a better description. And that compensation value has got no difference whether it's a short rolling contract or a 3-year contract. It will be exactly the same number. It makes no difference. So I understand where people are coming from and the paranoia and worry. Clearly, Michael is somebody special, and we're all seeing that and more beginning to think that. Do we feel that we're sufficiently secure? I don't think anything needs to be changed at this stage, and we ought to just probably drop that one and concentrate on backing Michael in different ways, because he's something special, we all believe.
Right, another one. In light of the sad events in recent months affecting Leicester City and Cardiff City, does GTFC have a contingency plan if something of a similar tragic nature occurred affecting the club?
I didn't print that one off, John.
I'm only asking the question.
It's funny because when Mike Rouse was on the board, he talked about key man insurance. I said, well, who's going to pay for that? He said, you are. At the end of the day, as a board, we've talked about this on and off, and we were actually discussing ideas centred around making my loans, which provides vulnerability to the football club in my demise, in the sense that executors of my will could call on my loans. So we were going to actually seek to produce a class of shares which I could sell back to the football club should the football club have the funds to buy them. We've concentrated, I've got to tell you, more on attempting to find a new owner, a good new owner, than we have actually solving that problem. So fingers crossed, I won't see a sudden demise, unless, of course, maybe one of my fishy friends wants to.
There's a slight extension on that then, John. What is the club's vision for the next 5 years, both on and off the pitch?
I think it's hugely important that we advance relocation in whatever guise we can. We have to work with the council. The fact that I'm a councillor makes no difference, in the sense that I have to declare an interest in every meeting that the subject comes up. But when all's said and done, I have some good friends on the council, and I think they now understand the vision and the importance of the football club, particularly because they've had it rammed down the neck for the last 10 years. So when all's said and done, we need to concentrate on a passage to relocation. So if in the next 5 years that could be achieved, that would be fantastic. And if it ends up being at Freeman Street, all well and good. I have no personal issues with that. The question is, how do we pay for it? And I'm sure with the right minds around the table, we can work up some good ideas to do that. And obviously, the fans with good intent, I've seen some of the discussions about this. They think, for instance, an Ibis hotel can enable the development. Well, usually you bring a a hotel to the area at your own cost, because it's important for the area. You don't tend to unlock big sums of money, and sometimes any sums of money. So to get an IBIS to go into that location wouldn't unlock the funds that could enable the stadium. It would broadly wash its face for the piece of land it's going on and the infrastructure, really. So we've got to come up with a better way forward than that. And just at this moment in time, personally, I don't know the answer, but I'm sure getting the right minds around the table, we can develop ways forward. So in terms of off the pitch, that's the most important thing for us. And naturally, finding good owners, new good owners, that would be a breath of fresh air, not only to me, but also I'm sure a good many people are ready for me to move on, and I understand that. And maybe some of the board members will stay, will not stay. Myself, I'm undecided whether I would want to stay if asked at all. But I think my time really has passed, and you know, I know what I've tried to do, and I know what I've failed to do, and I always wanted to do better. But the next 5 years, I think the important thing is we do find new owners and we do find a way to relocate. So in whatever way forward, I will be attempting to assist that process in every way, shape or form. So on the field, obviously we're all enamoured with Michael, and at the moment we're playing some good football, and we've got a good pace going about us in terms of points tally. We obviously had the blip earlier on in the season, which had we not, we would be probably more excited than we are. But we feel we're going in the right direction, and we've started to get the right pieces in place to build something that maybe can challenge next season. So the important thing year on year is to, from a board's point of view, support the manager with the resources necessary to believe that you can compete. So I think that is the biggest vision that a board should aspire to. To suggest we're going to be in the Championship or in the Premiership in any number of years or whatever can just come back to haunt you. Our important task is to make sure that we provide the manager with the resources that give you an opportunity to compete, and that's what, frankly, we've been doing for the last 18 years. Okay.
Right, thank you, John. There's another one here. Can you give the profile of the average GTFC season ticket holder, and what are the club actively doing to understand or target other untapped markets?
Could you just say the first bit, please?
Can you give the profile of the average GTFC season ticket holder?
The profile. Okay. I'm not quite.
Aging demographic.
Okay. It's not at my fingertips, but obviously we've got an ageing population locally, so it is important that we seek fresh support. And as an example, the last home game, we invited 800 young people, and we had a fantastic take-up on that. It's largely led by Graham Roger. We link up with schools. It doesn't happen just the last game, it happens on a repeatable basis. We often do children come free, kids go free, whatever, with an adult. We have a raft of initiatives, and the important thing is fans for the future. Now, daft as it sounds, when we were in the conference for the 6 years, which was a difficult pill to swallow, but when all said and done, we had some good times. And there's no doubt that the amount of times that the percentage of wins at that level was a big attraction for youngsters. And I've had so many youngsters that say that their beginning with this football club started around that time, and they found it enormously exciting, and are now cemented to the football club as a result of that, where you know, I've also had the same people saying it's not quite so exciting now in the Football League because you know you're not so certain of getting as good a percentage of results, if you like. So we do work hard in terms of attracting new support. In terms of gaining new interest and promoting the football club, I think it's fair to say there's an awful lot that we do in the community. Clearly, what happens on the pitch is vital. We see attendances rise and fall based on what happens on that postage stamp. I'm sure that the Trust will bear me out and confirm that there's a huge difference between how the bars operate since we were in the conference and back in the Football League. At the moment, I'm sure they're very buoyant because there's a lot of interest in what's happening on the pitch, but only just now. I think up until recently, I suggest takings were considerably down, and you're back to old levels, for want of a better description. But the time we were in the conference, we were buzzing all round the football stadium, frankly. So winning is the key ingredient to attracting more support. So again, from a board's point of view, it's essential we give Michael the tools that's necessary to believe that we can compete, and in doing so, that's how we'll get back people that used to come and also attract new blood, together with the initiatives that we have with schools and youngsters. Okay, John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say as well, I think one of the key parts of this is the ability now for the club to reinvest a little bit into the infrastructure to make those improvements to the toilet facilities, particularly for less able-bodied fans and indeed for ladies who are underrepresented in toilet facilities all around the ground, and doing that work there. There is a great attraction to coming to somewhere that is relatively well appointed, and you're not going to be queuing for the loo or things. So I think that's pretty key to get people back, giving them a good match day experience, which is why the Trust have invested quite heavily in the bars over the last 4 or 5 years, and continue to do so. But John's right. Our bar takings and things which help do everything for us have been significantly lower when we're going through difficult patches, because people don't come to the ground early, they don't have that extra pint, they don't stay for one after the game to talk about the winning goal, when quite frankly all you want to do is go home and lick your wounds and kick the cat. But yeah.
I'd just like to mention something in relation to the community side of things that the football club have moved on, which really is quite important for the younger members of the supporters. And Christine has had a lot of involvement in the Trust in relation to the junior members. Obviously we need to try and make it better for them. This is only a small thing, but to me it was really important that the football club supported a junior party for the junior members, obviously just before Christmas, and Lisa was involved in that very much, in promoting that for the football club. And it was a tremendously successful event, and Michael brought all his players, and they were all here, the whole squad came to that, and I remember I was there with Keats and we were sat there, and there was one little girl that came up, and she was 7 years old, and she had her goalkeeping gloves. She wanted to be a goalkeeper, and she had those gloves signed by Macca, and she will remember that for the rest of her life, and that's so important. And when the players had finished that party, they then went off to visit the disabled party and spent a lot of time with the people there. And you have to remember those things, because it's only a small thing to some people, but it's a big commitment by the players and the community, and that little girl will probably remember that for the rest of her life and probably want to be involved in junior female football and be a goalkeeper. And for me, very small but very important.
I would have to say that that's not how Alan described the kids' party to me after he'd finished with Keats. Another one, John. Away fixtures in previous years have shown the club has a disproportionately large exile fan base, with North East Links one of only 15 local authorities forecasting a decline in population in the next 10 years. What are the club doing to bring exiles home on a match day?
It's a good point. At the back end of last season, I met some young ladies at the final fixture, and I brought back some ideas to the football club, and I spoke to the office, and we came up with a range of ideas that I felt fitted with their suggestions. And we shared those with the Trust, and we've debated them. We've had some alternative proposals from the Trust, And other than the baker's dozen I was talking about, for the moment it's been shelved, but I can tell you that it's been rekindled by some external interest. Actually, it's an exile who's working with us, and we're working up some new ideas, some additional ideas, which we'll be sharing with the Trust and hoping to press home for the new season, some new initiatives. But ultimately, we've got to be very careful that we don't. I mean, for instance, one of the issues where if you do, let's say a 10 or 20 game season ticket, well, 20 is call it less, 15. You've got, if you have to nominate a seat, then that can become very, very difficult to administer. It's just one simple issue. There was many issues brought up by the office that felt insurmountable and would damage wider income streams, giving people the opportunity who currently do buy full season tickets and come to not so many games. Immediately you would lose that revenue. So on balance we left it, and as I say, we're working up some new ideas, and we'll be sharing that with Dave and his team, and seeing what we can do. But the baker's dozen went on sale. That's 13 tickets for the cost of 12, and the take-up wasn't that great. So it does indicate to me that it's more huff than puff, really. I would have expected some bigger take-up than 12, 13 sales of the baker's dozen offer to exiles.
Yeah, just add to that. What we did do just before Christmas was a 5-match special offer, which is obviously geared for the Christmas market, but also aimed at exiles, and that was not a bad take-up at all, to be fair. And that's something that, again, is something we're going to review now and maybe get into our thinking ready for next season. So let's talk to it.
Yeah, it's something that's very often asked of the Trust about what we can do for exiles, and I know that Dave is working close with the club to see what else we can do there. Just one last one, and then we'll have a break, if that's okay. John, do you really think it's a good idea attempting to interact with fans on the Fishy Forum? Given your position at the club, should you not be rising above the behaviour sometimes on display there?
On occasions, I have basically informed, and on the rare occasion, well, actually, more often than not, it's been in reference to getting your facts right. So it's actually been providing useful information, which actually in some quarters has been very welcomed. But of course, the hardliners will never be satisfied. They'll always look for an agenda or whatever they might, a witch hunt or whatever. And when all said and done, you'll never appease them. And I'm not trying to appease them, but when certain concerns are raised, for instance, there was one raised recently that the main stand was going to be condemned. I went on the Fishy and put the record right. It was causing alarm. There'd been a lot of hits, and I feel it's incumbent on the club to occasionally dip into it. Now, you might say we could just do a statement, but so often we do a statement and it goes completely ignored, not even spoken about on the Fishy. Rightly or wrongly, on a rare occasion I go on it. On occasions I've probably gone one step too far, but I'm human. I take an awful lot of abuse. A lot of it's not fair. I would argue most of it's not fair, if any of it. I think there's a way to behave, and hiding behind a keyboard is not the way to do it, in my view. I'm always available, more than happy to speak with people, sit down with them, talk to them on a rational basis. But some of the stuff you get thrown at you, whether it be hurled at you in a car park after a game when we've not done so well, is unwarranted, and occasionally you'll get a reaction from me. I'm human, and I ain't going to apologise for that.
Don't need to.
Thank you, John. Okay, ladies and gents, if we take a short break now, and then I've got quite a few more questions. Thank you.
Carried. This football club actually voted against it, and I'd like to explain why. Originally, when Checker Trade was put to us, we were the new kids on the block. We'd just been promoted, and possibly other clubs in the room had enough information or prior knowledge to what we had. Being the new kid on the block and having an inquiring mind and not being happy unless I hear the facts for myself, I asked, was this the thin end of the wedge? What was it, the potential for more Premiership intervention? We were satisfied on that question. The answer is you would need 90% of the football clubs to support the idea of Premiership football B teams, for want of a better description, in our ordinary competition. That would never happen. Fans wouldn't allow it, and nor would owners of football clubs. So I was happy on that front. In terms of the proposals on the table, they were for under 21 teams, and there was no overage players, and certainly it wasn't 23s. That was put to us. Now, my personal view was there was money on the table. It wasn't linked to the 123 million that the Premiership already gave us. There was no conditions, and in fact it turned out when the deal was done that the Premiership weren't that interested in coming on board. So there's a number of teams today still don't take part, and what happened, without reference back to the football club, was the board decided to make a decision to include teams under 23 and also 5 overage players. Now that really got my goat. If there'd have been reference back to the football club, this football club would have certainly voted against that, because the last thing I want to see is a Premiership B team, for want of a better description, winning that competition, which so nearly happened last year. So this year, the proposal is under 21s. So it's going back to square one. And my concern is, and I put it to the board, that I don't believe we should vote for this, and the real reason for it is we don't know how the board of the EFL may change the rules without reference back to the football club. So the best position to take is vote against it, and that's what I recommended to the board, and that's what we agreed. Nevertheless, it was voted to continue with the competition, and I understand that, and actually think there are good aspects about it, in particular getting the opportunity to look at young players, get close to Premiership managers, and create those contacts which ultimately can benefit the football club. That's at least one of the benefits, together with the monetary side of it, and also the inter-competition, the more local games that come about, which reduce costs, and also the fact that we don't have to pay the away team, such as when we played Sunderland, we don't have to pay their costs, where when we're playing somebody like Chesterfield, for instance, we would have to pay their costs. So there are a lot of benefits, and we all know that in the past the early rounds don't make money, but the facts of the matter are these competitions have benefited this football club significantly. In past years, I would say we're at least £2.5 million in pocket. Without that money, we clearly couldn't have done the same things in terms of supporting managers' budgets and so on. So it's been a good competition. We don't want to see it die, but at the same time, when we agree something at an official meeting and we put our hands up, we don't expect the board, without reference back to the football clubs, to change the decisions that were put before us. So that's the reason why we voted against. John, do you want to add anything?
Only that, I suppose the only thing that I would add to that is that throughout the Checker Trade discussions at football club board level, from a personal point of view, I've always represented the Mariners Trust view and the fans' view, which has been in opposition to the Checker Trade trophy. So, I was pleased that the club voted against it on this occasion. Really, really pleased. But it's just that reassurance back to you that I know that we saw the trust saw the boycott. We understood the reasons, and that view was represented at football club board level. People sometimes wonder what the point of having a trust board member is. That voice was in the room. It wasn't just on social media. It wasn't just on the fish sheet. It was in the room, and it was appropriately voiced to the football club. But the board is a democratic body, and we finally voted no for the reasons that John's articulated, and I'm really, really pleased about that.
Thank you, John.
If I could just say, yes, thank you for that, John. And it is fair to say John did represent the fans, and as a board we absolutely listened to the fans, but at the same time, you know, business-orientated decisions, the benefit of keeping the competition going, and the opportunity to get to the National Stadium is more likely to be in our favour than some other clubs' favour. We've got history of doing that, so we didn't want to see it die, and that's the fundamental reason why we've supported it in the past.
Thank you, John. A rather long one here. Do you think a plot of vacant available land in a central town position with bus routes from all outlying districts converging on the area, one railway station with easy walking distance and another nearby, with two mainline stations at each end of the area, several road routes into the site, including a motorway link, a good number of shops, food and drink outlets close by, with potential for hotel, restaurant and leisure development, and favoured by a lot of supporters, would be a good place to build a football stadium.
Thank you, Terry. No brownie points for guessing where he's talking about. Clearly that's Freeman Street, and you know, there's a lot going for Freeman Street in some regards, but ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. We've got to find a solution how it could be paid for, and ultimately what it will look like and deliver in terms of the additional income streams that's so vital to the club's long-term future.
Thank you. Are there any plans to sell season tickets for next season earlier, with incentives to renew earlier?
Okay, last year we did sell them before, we put them on sale before the season ended. The take-up wasn't great, but of course, I suppose we did have a difficult back end, but of course it was vastly improved when Michael came and we got survival. We did start selling before the season ended. The take-up wasn't terrific, but we're now in a new budget round. The board are considering budgets right now. We're looking at season tickets in totality and wider ticket prices and so on. I'm not sure where that's going to land. The officers are making recommendations which the board will consider very, very soon. That will dictate ultimately what the manager's budget will be. Sorry, Terry, your question, please?
Oh God, I've forgotten that one.
Oh, selling it early.
Selling
there's no doubt.
Early, yeah.
Thank you, Terry. Sorry, I forgot the point. Yeah, there's no doubt that season tickets will go on sale before the season runs out.
Okay, thank you. A question on Michael Jolly's playing budget this season. Is he under, over, spent it?
Yeah, you get knocked from pillar to post on this one, don't you, in the sense that at the beginning of the season I think there was fair acknowledgement that we'd made considerable investment in the squad. That petered out when things weren't going very well, so my hands haven't been deep enough in my pocket. The January window came and we let some players out and brought some players in, and it's probably, in my opinion, the best January window we've had during my time. I think there wasn't too many movements, and the movements out and the movements in were probably the best. Now, we always assist the manager's recommendation on what he wants to do. It's not guidance from the board, we don't dictate. Yeah, I think it was probably the best January I've experienced, and fingers crossed that will bear out to the end of the season. Terry, in terms of budget, your question is, do we give them a good budget or not? I think ultimately, for the largest part of my duration, the managers have had a competitive budget. I think it's fair to say our wider knowledge now of budgeting is more visible to us. We do get an understanding of where we peg in the pecking order of our division, and I think we need to do better next year, slightly better, not a lot, slightly better, to give us that better opportunity. And I've spoken to Michael about that in brief, and the board are, as I say, in a budget round right now, and the objective is to give Michael some more funds for next season.
Okay, John, slightly controversial. After the embarrassing and aggressive fans forum and the animosity shown towards the fans, what do you believe has altered as your demeanour is totally different tonight? Is it the lack of your 70s porn style look?
In terms of animosity towards the fans, I don't believe there was any. Obviously, Matt was chairing the evening, and we appreciated him doing that, and each and every fans forum, we can't thank them enough for their representation in doing that. He was chairing the meeting, and clearly it was starting to get out of hand when effectively Stephen Marley was being called a liar. Now, he is the most parallel, upright man, citizen you could wish to come across. He is straight up and down. If whatever he says is gospel, he would not tell a lie to save his life. And for him to be questioned in the way that he was broadly called a liar, and questioned significantly on facts that he was putting across, deeply hurt him. And his response to tell somebody to shut up, again, is human. He works for this football club for nothing. He puts a lot of hours in. We all do. And we give of ourselves. We're like the Mariners Trust. We're like any individual that contributes to the football club, and there's many that don't get paid. And I don't think he deserved that. And it could have been handled differently from the mic, from the centre stage. And when it came to the later part of the evening, Matt's here, and I won't shy away from the fact that I asked him two simple questions. He could have managed that in a number of ways, and for him to say, I don't apologise for my editorial content, when clearly it was wrong, was his own choice of words. Now, I use the wrong word from time to time, put my foot in it, and I pay the price. I accept the price I paid. You know, we're all human, and he's human too. So I think I best departed at that point, but there was no animosity to the fans. There was disquiet at the fact that certain things had been reported that were unhelpful towards the football club, and in particular the manager and his position at the time. And I do believe it's history, and I think anybody that looks back at that video will not see it in the light that some want to portray it.
Can you not get Matt to come over, Nick?
No, we're not going to do that. No.
Why not?
No, we're not going to do that. This is what I want to say about it. Okay, that it's in the past, it's moved on, and that's the end of it. We're here tonight, we're having a very good evening. Let's think about going forward. Let's think about the relationship we've got now, and let's think about 5,500 fans applauding the team off the pitch at Crystal Palace in that round of the FA Cup, because that for me was what it's all about. We've all moved on, and we're here all together. Matt's here, and he's enjoying the night, I'm sure, like everybody else, and we just need to move on with it and all pull together, because at the end of the day, one team makes a mad dash for the playoffs.
Thanks for that positivity, and Matt, I absolutely assure you there's no animosity from me. You know, we all get things wrong, and I think it's fair to say the platform I'm on, it's easy for people to throw stones and pick fault in so many ways, whether I was right, wrong or indifferent. I'm accused of being wrong more than anybody else in this building. I have to get used to it, and you know, I like to think we're friends, I like to think we're past it. And as far as I'm concerned, I agree with everything that Alan said. We need to move on, and we should get closer together.
Just from my point of view, I haven't come tonight to rake over the past.
No, we don't think.
Can you come over here?
Absolutely.
No.
I've come here it's my day off today, so I'm just coming here.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's move on, Terry.
That's very well.
Thank you very much, Matt. Another one for John. If Freeman Street was to come to fruition, given that the site will not be as large as required, what thoughts have been given to provision of community pitches elsewhere? And as a separate one, have you thought of combining Cleethorpes Town with King George IV for Town's new ground? That was a Scunthorpe supporter.
That's a time bomb there then. At the end of the day, clearly Freeman Street doesn't facilitate the community pitches that was wished for, nor the training facilities that the club absolutely needs. We wanted them to be linked together, but if they can't be, clearly we will look for a site elsewhere, and there are several opportunities. I know, for instance, Cleve Fields has been discussed. The football club has actually been looking at that one, particularly for the youth setup. We also have the engagement with the partnership with Wintering Oasis. There's a fantastic facility there that's well worth visiting if anybody gets the time. We've built brand new changing rooms there. We've got great pitches. They've been well worked on. There's more work to do, and of course we've got the 24/7 pitch that we use, which we're working with the school to upgrade that to a 4G, and fingers crossed that will happen in the near future. But yeah, in terms of training facilities and particularly community facilities, which we wanted to bring to the party to help us with income streams and also our wider engagement with the public and particularly fans for the future. It's really, really important we do find these facilities, but I do think we're blessed with green spaces to do that. So if we do end up at Freeman Street, I believe we can extend our wings and find a suitable location to do those things.
Yeah, thank you, John. As you're looking for new investors, do you think there are better ways to market the club other than solely the club website, which has such a small audience? Do you think this could be improved to widen the net and make it more public knowledge than it is?
Maybe I could put me pecker on the chopping block. Right. I think we've worked very hard on that. You know, time after time, it's been on Sky News. We've had interest from abroad as a result. Nothing's transpired yet in terms of you know, coming to a conclusion and a deal. But I still believe that we're a great club, we've got fantastic history. Grimsby is a difficult place to develop in, and most of these people who want to take an interest ultimately want to deliver something that's viable. Grimsby is not an easy place to actually deliver a viable scheme for one reason or another, and I guess some of which we might understand. So it's a difficult one to do. We continue to market it. I don't know if we can market it any better, and if anybody's got any ideas, we'd be more than happy to discuss that with them. And as I say, we continue to discuss with various parties an opportunity for them to take the club forward. But ultimately, as mentioned earlier, and John did eloquently say broadly the same things, we do need to see that they've got the wherewithal, particularly when there's difficult times, to manage the football club.
Yeah, another one here, John, is largely been covered, but I've never doubted that you and Stephen Marley can balance the books every year and keep the club in a stagnant position. But as we're now in 2019 and the football world has moved on at a fast pace in the past 30 years and is leaving us behind in so many ways, we obviously need new investment and fresh ideas and a new stadium. As the custodian of the club, can a clear, fully costed plan be sent out or be set out that we can envisage? I think you've covered a lot of that, Alan.
I mean, what I would say about that is our duty as custodians is to ensure that there's a legacy for future generations. You're not sat with somebody that's prepared to risk all and ultimately sail off into the sunset and leave a bag of poo behind. I think I've diligently dealt with the problems before me when I joined the board, and they were significant. And I think actually we've managed the finances of the football club as well as any other football club, if not better. And during that time, we've enjoyed some football success. The downside is we didn't win enough games in finals and in playoffs, because we've competed. We've been in, I think, six playoffs during my time, and we've been to Wembley and Millennium, I think, a total of 5 times during my time. and we've only won once. So to that degree, I'm a failure. But it isn't for the lack of effort, and I believe that we've delivered a competitive budget, more in previous years than probably we have this year. This is the first year that I'm questioning the support that we've given to the manager, frankly.
Right, John, the last one I've got here, around £400,000 has been used to service directors' loans in the last 2 years. Do you expect repayments to continue at this rate, and do you have a time frame in mind for when directors' loans will be eliminated?
Okay. Rather a corrosive subject. It keeps cropping up, and I believe at the end of the day we need to look at directors' loans in the rounds. Now, there isn't a director that's ever lost money in this football club. I potentially could be the first. Whoever takes the football club over may or may not pay loans off. They might want to do a deal. I don't know. We don't know the colour of an offer yet. But at the same time, those loans, if people want to take the mickey out of the word benign, carry on. But the facts are they don't carry interest and they're not going to be called on. They've saved this football club circa £100,000 a year. That's equivalent to a decent striker, to say the least. So that's the magnitude of support that yours truly has given this football club in terms of benign loans. So it's quite upsetting to hear some of the soul-destroying comments that's said. The facts of the matter is, ultimately, it's about have we given the manager a decent budget. Now, we still have funds in the bank, and we had sufficient funds for the board to want to propose to repay me the monies that have repaid me over the last 3 years. It's not affected the decisions we've made to the budgets, and ultimately we have to work within salary caps as well. So our turnover is taken into consideration, and this year basically a salary cap is set at 50% of turnover. Now, if you've enjoyed other incomes from transfers and so on, they can actually go into the budget as well. But you'd be foolhardy to put all of your transfer fees into that 1 year's budget and set costs thereafter, which you've got to keep up with. Obviously Lincoln have enjoyed massive success, and equally in terms of the cost of their squad, it's gone up significantly. There's a danger that if you don't manage that properly and the club runs out of steam, that it can come home to roost. I don't fancy putting that club in this position, particularly if we're not in a position to back it. The last time the football club lost £900,000, 2 directors put their hands in the pocket to support that loss. And we don't want to get back there again. It's not healthy, it's not a good thing to do. But the important thing here is, did we give the manager a competitive budget, and did the loans do any damage to providing a competitive budget? What I've said earlier is that we know the pecking order where we sit within the budget table within our division, and personally I'd like to see it a little bit higher than it is this season. I think, hand on my heart, we've been top 7 during the time in the conference, because there's a few sugar daddies, there's a few clubs similar to ours like Wrexham, so I reckon we were about 7th. In our previous years in the Football League, except when we were in Division 1, I reckon we were certainly above 12th, maybe sort of 8th, 9th, something like that. I don't feel now we're in that same position, and as a board we've got to do something about it, in my humble opinion, and that's what I'll be proposing. Now, in terms of budget setting, generally what I've done each and every year is I've enabled the budget to be set with the club effectively losing money. Now, so what we don't do is we don't set our budgets based on optimistic gates or pessimistic gates. We set our budget on moderate gates, and if we then look at that, basically we take all of our known costs out, which are straightforward, year in, year out. We know exactly what the club costs, and then of course you're left with some money which you allocate to the playing budget. And what I generally do is then I prop that up by £200,000 or £250,000, so that in the event that we only hit that modest level, you know that you're in for that sort of cost. Fingers crossed you're going to do better and you'll erode those losses and could potentially, do better than. For instance, if you have a decent cup run, or actually you're 7th and above, everything comes together. But clearly, if you use that same philosophy, which of course we did the last time we were in the Football League and we were relegated, we were £900,000 out of pocket, so it can go really badly and really quickly badly. So that's what ultimately a new owner's got to be able to demonstrate they can facilitate. Because if this club got into such a mess again, clearly I would back it. On my watch, I would back it. And that's broadly how we set our budgets. So we're not just working within the salary cap. We're also taking some risk in terms of setting that budget. Does that make sense to anybody? Does anybody need any further explanation than that?
No, but can I just come in on the original? I just want to come in on the original question, because actually I think that there are two ways of looking at what's going on in terms of the repayment of the club's overall debt. I think it's a really positive thing that the budget is allowing us to responsibly try and pay down some of the club's debt. It makes the club on a much sounder footing. The budgets are set, as John's just said, and actually they're set very sensibly. They're set with a great deal of thought and a great deal of work from a lot of people. I would take issue with the use of the word stagnant in terms of the budget setting rounds. It's a really active process. It's one that's given a great deal of thought to try and give the manager the best budget we can. And actually, we can't have it both ways. We can't want to pay down the debt and invest lots in the football club. It needs to be done in a balanced and measured way. And I think that's what we achieve and what we are achieving. So actually, it's that responsible custodianship of the football club again. We don't want to rack up huge debt in chasing without good cause. We are well run.
So our budget was slightly lower, really. Keats had £4, and he bought the Swedish flag, and it went down with Seb and Ludwig's Storm at Michael's night. So we feel that we budgeted very effectively as well, John, with the money that we had to spend.
Just one comment that was made at the night we had with Michael Jolly. There was a question to the 2 Swedish players that turned up about a flat back four.
that was Lee. That was Lee, the flagman.
Right. That concludes all the questions I've got. Hopefully, are there any more burning questions that anyone would like to put?
Can I just ask one? John, in terms of the stadium in Freeman Street, I think there's a lot of fans chomping at the bit, really, wanting to sort of get on and see some progress. Is there anything the fans can be doing at this point? Is there any pressure that needs to be put on anybody? What can we do?
I think there'll be a time to show your support. I think there's a bit of water to go under the bridge before we get there. I think the club's got to, with the strategic partners, work out exactly what's on offer and the problems that need to be overcome for delivery, and we are engaged in that. And then there'll be a time when it would be great for wholehearted support to be signalled if we can get past certain barriers. And if there are barriers then that we feel we can't get past, I think it's incumbent upon the club to share that, and we will do that. Okay. Thank you, Dave.
I've seen online that the new floodlights are going to cost about £300,000. You've probably seen it yourself. How much have we made off the FA Cup run, and what do you intend to do about it as a club? Or with that money?
I think the FA Cup run gave us about £150,000 roughly. In terms of paying for the lights, number one, I think it's less than £300,000. With deconstructing the old ones, it is quite a cost. We're not talking about flag right now, but we need to make them safe where they can't be considered a hazard. the light towers as well, of course. So deconstructing them will cost quite a lot of money, bringing cranes in and taking them down to the ground. So that's got to be factored in. But I don't believe that it's as much as £300,000. And one way or another, we're going to find that money. But the important thing is that the manager's budget is set at a level that gives him an opportunity to compete. And I've acknowledged we need to make it slightly higher than we've done it this season. The reason I've been paid back monies is because basically we don't have an overdraft facility. We had surplus funds, considerable surplus funds. They're not yet depleted, and I made a commitment when actually receiving those funds that if the club requires, I will put the money back. At the end of the day, we have to demonstrate that the club does repay loans. We have a protocol agreement, a working arrangement between directors, and it's usually important that that document demonstrates workability for reasons which I don't want to go into. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Can I ask a question, please?
Sorry? Oh. I don't often get young ladies waving at me.
You were talking about season ticket holders, and I get the feeling that it's important for the club for season ticket holders to renew quite early. But they put a date for the closure of season ticket holders to renew the tickets at early bird prices, etc. But then that date is always extended. So now season ticket holders that are experienced wait because they think, well, no, I can go another week or another 2 weeks, plus I'll extend that. So if it's important for the club to get that money in early, maybe you should stick to that, stick to the date.
I understand where you're coming from, and on a straightforward playing field, I'd suggest that's a good idea, but cutting your nose off to spite your face comes to mind. I think there would be some people then that are used to the extension that would equally cut their nose off and probably stand still and not buy the ticket if it then went up. I guess it's playing the game. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this now. It's playing the game, and obviously what's important to the football club is getting the funds in as early as possible, because it's all part of the budgeting process. So I hear what you say, but I don't think the football club would be minded to set an earlier deadline. You might say, in truth, the real deadline is the one it gets finally extended to. It might be that we should say that is the deadline. Okay. Well, thank you for the question, and I appreciate where you're coming from.
I'm just going to ask one more question, although I've been told not to. I'm going to ask it anyway.
Please do.
I'm assuming that the coffee and tea bars are now franchised.
Yes, they are.
Mainly because I sit in this end, I sit in the Lower Smiths all the time.
Okay.
But I had a reason to take a group of special needs kids across to the main stand in October. And I ordered a coffee, and a guy that was with me went and got us coffee, and I gave him £2.50 because it's £2.20 here. And he came back with a lovely cup of Lavazza coffee. He gave me £1 change, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Because the coffee here is like mud water.
Okay, so are we complaining about the coffee or the service?
I don't want to pay £2.20 for a cup of coffee, but when you pay £1.50 for a really good cup of coffee over there, £2.20 over here.
Right, okay. I'm just understanding why that's happening. Dave shared with me his knowledge, so probably the less said the better, because you shouldn't receive that coffee within the contract that we have with the catering guys. Yeah, in terms of the outsourcing catering, it's worked really, really well for the football club. Year in, year out, I was sick of seeing the fact that we were struggling to break even in that department. Staffing the catering arrangements are difficult. Providing the facilities up to standard isn't that easy here. And we linked up with there was a predecessor who did it before this guy, and it worked quite well. And I think with the guy that's doing it now, who's done it for a number of years, it's worked particularly well, and we do get a guaranteed royalty, and it's not broken to my knowledge. I think when things don't go well on the pitch, it's easy to moan about these things, but by and large, I'm not hearing problems, and if there are any, then do please let the stewards know, let ourselves know, and you know, we'll always talk to the owners because they are keen to get it right.
John, go around and try the coffee in each bar and then make your own drink.
Okay. Right. Coffees aren't good enough. Would you like to see more powder in it? What would you like?
The taste would be nice.
The taste, okay. Right. Coffee. If that's the only complaint we've got, it's better than the flask.
Stephen.
Yes?
I thought you were going to ask a question.
No.
Oh.
You won't ask a question.
He's got your pound.
Terry, this gentleman here.
You mentioned the checker trade earlier, and obviously I'm aware Sean Harvey is now stepping down in his role as chief exec of the English Football League. Was he the main driver for B teams, Premier League B teams, in that checker trade trophy, and therefore is there likely to be a change in the position of the EFL board around that?
Well, it's interesting because we've received a letter today that I've debated with Philip Day actually, and the letter talks about the agreement that it's come to the end of its line, that the board feel it's right that Sean goes and Sean feels it's right that he goes, and he talks about wanting to go in a different direction. They talk about wanting to go in a different direction. Well, frankly, I'd like them to share with me what direction they're going in because we're in the dark. And I think that's been one of the problems during Sean's reign. He's kept stuff to himself, and when he's finally launched it, it's often been controversial. What was the
20 teams per division was a change.
He had the what was that? The whole game solution. It drove us bonkers, frankly. Again, new kids on the block. We've just been promoted, and I was thrust with a microphone under my nose, and asked questions about it, and I knew nothing. So it turned out that other football clubs knew nothing as well, and we're at the Football League conference, and everybody's absolutely fizzing because they're being asked questions for which they know nothing about. And he's launched and proposed something, and it's in the public domain before he discusses it with clubs. I think that is an Achilles heel and probably something that didn't sit well with clubs that are probably more influential than ourselves. When we're in the Championship, to be fair, we were very much in the know and we were quite influential and thought of quite well. I think further down the pecking order that becomes less so. After saying that, we do hold a corner and we do represent good arguments, and clearly we want to, when we go to Football League meetings, we want to be reassured, and we go to great lengths to make sure that we're happy with what's going on, and if there's anything to say, we do say it. You know, we look after this football club in that regard for sure.
So maybe might be a change of direction.
Well, Philip and myself will be going to Derby on the 28th. Football League meeting, and we'll be asking, you know, why would you write a letter that suggests a change of direction? Why would you do that? I mean, it's just controversial in itself. So, you know, is it going to be more of the same, or are we going to be brought into the fold? I'd like to think we know a little bit more about what's going on, what's being planned, and you know, you don't get whole game solutions thrust upon you, which did us no favours, because ultimately that coming ahead of the checker trade, I think, set the suspicion that it was for wider Premiership intervention, when really and truly his idea and plans weren't discussed with clubs and clearly weren't accepted with clubs. He got a thick ear and he was told to go away and think about it. So the basis on why he's left, I probably never fully understand, but we will ask questions about that, and clearly the direction, we want to know what's being proposed.
Has anybody got any more questions? Because if not, I'm going to do the closing ceremony, but there'll be no fireworks. Sorry.
About the you were on about the bars, that the revenue's gone down, but there was a change this season with the glasses and the way the pour that's there. Do you think that's had an effect? Because I definitely don't buy as much as I used to. You know, there was an incident apparently that caused you to change it. Well, over in the main street, so I don't think it was over there, but I noticed what happens now, you get a plastic glass and the guy dumps the beer in and slings the bottle with still some beer left. I'm not sure whether this is relevant.
From this bar here?
No, over the other side.
Oh, right, okay.
I mean, I'm not sure whether it's relevant to this forum, but it's just a point that...
Right.
Has that affected the taking?
Well, Sharon's listened to that one. She's on her way, she's running down here now.
She can now.
There were particular reasons that we went to those classes, were there not?
What's that? The plastic? Yeah.
Yeah, hello. Okay. Yeah, plastic glasses basically all around the ground now in all the bars for health and safety reasons.
Yeah, the point the gentleman was making was that the bottles are not entirely empty when they're poured into the glasses across the road.
Well, that's a bit of froth.
Before, you could get your glass and your bottle.
If I could squeeze it out, I would.
That's a
good Tom Jones song.
Has it affected the taking? Because I know
No, it hasn't.
Results on the pitch.
No, it's certainly not affected takings. I do an analysis of the bar takings throughout the last 5 seasons that we've been doing the bars, and the only real thing that affects the takings is what happens there on the pitch. It's as simple as that. I mean, if we to take one example of how an away crowd can boost the bar takings. Coventry City last year, we took more money in the away bar than we did in the entire ground on at least 3 occasions.
Greedy.
Yeah.
Greedy people.
Yeah. They got through some stuff. So it does.
So I'm going to wrap it up now, ladies and gents. Just a couple of thank yous, really. Dave was instrumental in setting this meeting up, so I thank him for that. People that know me will know that I'm fairly frank, so I'm going to be fairly frank and say that from some quarters we got some criticism about doing this tonight, and I'm really pleased that we did do it. And I've known John quite a long time through a previous life, and he doesn't shy away from coming to do these nights, and I thank you for John for coming. Thank you very much. More importantly, we thank you all very much for coming and participating tonight. Hope you all enjoyed it. Keats is still there with his games night tickets if you fancy beating Harry Clifton at FIFA, whatever it is, because I don't play it. And most of all, we'll see you all at Swindon on Saturday for the big game. Thanks all very much. Have a good evening.